Promoted listings are a way that you can promote your items for sale. Now, what does that mean? Every single thing that you do on eBay is to get your listing to the top of the search engine. That's our biggest goal. The top. Most people just look at the top. They don't go into page 2, 3, and 4 for almost anything whenever they search for something. So we want to be as close to the top as possible. And a few years ago, eBay said there's such a thing as pay-per-click, where you can pay us for every single time anybody clicks on any item that you offer for sale. Even if they don't buy it, you're still going to pay us if they click on your listing. That's a traditional pay-per-click model. Amazon uses it. A lot of places use it. That is what priority promoted listing is on the right here. Don't do it if you're an everything seller, as most of us are. If you get most thrift stores, garage sales, the places where you can make gold instead of just eking out a living like you might be able to if you were an Amazon reseller or something doing retail arbitrage. Oh, what a terrible life. And tying up so much money on that sort of reselling model. It doesn't make any sense to me. What does make sense is to promote our listings using eBay's promoted listings percentage. I'm really going to give you some insight here in just a minute. I mean, it's really going to blow you away if you didn't know that. The left side, anytime that you're creating a listing and you get down to the bottom, the left side of this promote your listing screen is the standard promoted listing model that eBay rolled out several years ago. And the way it works is if anyone clicks on your item and buys it or buys something else, eBay's modified this a little bit lately to make it better for eBay. But if you use a promoted listings, what you are doing is bribing eBay to put your item higher in the search engine. I happen to be selling, what am I selling here? I happen to be selling a Richard Strauss Concerto, opus number 11. It's a partitura. If you don't know what that is a conductor score that has all of the parts of the players. If it's a trio, it will have 3 parts. If it's a large orchestra, the partitura, the conductor score, will have every part. And I am selling Richard Strauss's opus number 11, and we get down to promote your listings. What I can do is click on promoted listings, and as long as there's a percent in this box, eBay will boost my listing towards the top into any search that this musical score of mine happens to appear in. Anytime buyers search for anything where this item happens to appear in the search results, if I put a percentage here, promoted listings percentage here, I'm bribing eBay, put me higher than a lot of people. As a matter of fact, if I have the highest promoted listings percentage, if I'm 13.5, which, by the way, that's what eBay suggests, 13.5%. Stick with that for just a second. We're going to return to that problem. That's the whole basis for this video. But if I actually bribe eBay with 13.5% on this promoted listings, what I have just told eBay is, if you show me in the search results and I sell, I'm going to give you, on top of your seller fees, another 13.5% of my selling price. So if it sells for $100, you're going to get an extra $13.50 just because you sold it for me. You put me higher in the search engine. Maybe that's why it sold. Even if that's not why it sold, as long as someone clicked on the item and eventually bought it, I pay the eBay $13.50 if this score sells for $100, if I have a 13.5% promoted listings fee. And then I also pay them the insertion fee and all of that. That's always with us, just like the poor. Well, the problem is I don't like eBay's suggestions. It's always way too high. Almost never should you use eBay's suggested high promoted listings fee. Why would eBay do this? If I owned eBay, I would suggest a high fee too, because I make more money as eBay. But you say, but Greg, that's me. You say, but Greg, you like eBay. Oh, I like eBay a lot. You say, but Greg, you're always talking about how great of a company eBay is, how wonderful eBay is to its resellers, to its sellers, to people like us. Yes, I do. Not perfect. Not only that, eBay can be kind of jerky sometimes to sellers, but I have sold on every platform. I was a full-time Amazon reseller for 3 years. I know how other platforms treat their sellers. eBay treats us like royalty compared to everyone else. And I love selling on eBay. That's why I do it. That's why I think you should do it. Primarily, I think you should only sell on eBay with rare exception. Maybe Facebook Marketplace for large items that you don't want to ship, that sort of thing. Okay. Got a lot of crafts? Maybe you go to Etsy with some of those. High-end fashion? Maybe you go to Poshmark, or maybe you just sell that on eBay. I think it's important to be a master of one instead of know a little bit about everything and kind of do everything sort of halfway. I don't want a bunch of reselling platforms to keep track of. I want to know one very well, and eBay rewards me for that, and eBay will reward you. But I do bribe eBay with a promoted listings fee on every single item I sell. Other people, other successful sellers like Polish Pete UK, He's a friend of the channel. He has a YouTube channel. You really ought to watch it. He's really good. He's kind of a curmudgeon. That's what I like about him. He's an honest guy, and he tells you the way it is. I really like that. I think we can learn a lot more from Polish Pete, who's shooting straight to us over so many that are just all unicorns and rainbows. They don't tell you any of the truth. They don't want to rock the boat, and you don't learn much, and you waste a lot of time with channels like that. But his view of promoted listings, and if he's ever watches this, Pete, if I'm misstating this, please let me know. I will correct it. I think generally Polish Pete is not thrilled with using promoted listings as a primary promotion source. That's pretty smart. None of us should use it as our primary source. I just use it as a constant source, but I'm always running sales, always doing coupons, always sending offers, always doing everything else that seems to make a lot more money, but I always want a fairly small promoted listings percentage on every item I sell. Unless I'm wrong, I don't think Polish Pete UK wants a promoted listing on every item he sells, and he's successful. It works for his model. That's fantastic. This works for my model, and maybe it's a difference between UK and USA, or maybe not. Doesn't matter. Both of us are successful. We approach it from two different angles, generally, although we have a lot in common with what we promote. Well, as soon as you on promoted listings, you will not see this promote your listing if you have a brand new selling account. eBay takes a month or 2 or 3. eBay wants to see you sell a few things before they give you this power. And this is power. You literally are bribing eBay to put you higher in the search engine so that you sell more things. And all of a sudden, you're listing an item every day. If you follow my advice and you list at least one item every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, even if you have a brand new account. Well, if you're like me, you're going to list 9 days a week and 412 days a year. Don't do your best, do my best. So there's that. But I do a low promoted listings fee. The lowest you can go is 2%. The majority of sellers don't do promoted listings. Anytime you look at search results, you'll see a word that says sponsored listings on most of the ones at the top of the search. Sponsored listings, those are sellers that have paid a percentage, a promoted listings percentage. Generally, there are other ways to do sponsored listings, but that's the most common. But you'll see very few compared to everyone else. Most sellers don't do promoted listings on most of their items that they sell. So if you just do the bare minimum of 2.0, you're way above the noise in the crowd. You're bribing eBay, put me higher than most sellers, all other things being equal. Just put me a little bit higher than you normally would. That's what a 2% would do, the bare minimum. You can go 2.1, which will really put you above most of the noise because most people use 2.0 as a promoted listings fee. So if you go just 0.1 higher, 2.1, you're going to be above the crowd. You're going to be higher in the search engine than most sellers. But if you go higher than that, the higher you go, you're really beating a lot of sellers. You're paying eBay to put you high in the search engine. Now, I go on every single item I sell. Great sellers out there, successful sellers, wealthy sellers won't do this necessarily. The number one seller of used men's clothing over the last 5 years, he does a flat 10% promoted listing. I'd never do 10%, but I don't have to. I don't sell the types of items, and most of you don't either, that requires that high of a fee. He may or may not agree. It's Tekken Sports, if you've ever heard of him. Great guy, wealthier than I'll ever be. Sharp guy, he knows what he's doing, 10% across the board. Well, he sells a lot of clothing that is just standard clothing, $20, $30 pieces, and he needs that extra boost, and he's well rewarded for it. Most of you and I sell one-off items, items that we get that are vintage and used and one of a kind and not many for sale on eBay. When we do comps, when we're out in the wild sourcing, we want to find things that most people want, but there aren't many of them for sale on eBay. So we don't have to do a huge promoted listings. We just have to be above the noise. So I go, now watch what happens to my screen here. eBay says 13.5% is what we suggest. I'm selling a conductor score of a Richard Strauss Opus, number 11, and eBay suggests 13.5%. And I'm going, no, I'm going to give you what I always put on my promoted listings, 3.1. That's what I promote across the board. I will never list an item that doesn't have 3.1%. I'll never list an item that has more than that. I'll never list an item that has less than that. This is a model that works well for me. Yes, I also do sales, coupons, all of that. This is not what I would consider my primary promotional method, promoted listings, but it is my constant and consistent method. It works very well for me. Look what eBay did the moment I erased 13.5, which is their suggested percentage, which is what mine would be if I owned eBay because I want a lot more money. And I replaced it with eBay put this blue exclamation point warning. Low ad rate may limit your performance. Apply suggested ad rate. Do what we say and give us 13.5% of your money. No, I'm not going to do that. However, I understand what promoted listing is all about. A promoted listing, especially their suggested ad rate, does have some validity. They use some analysis on coming up with this number, but they base it on the category that I'm selling in, not on my item. They base it on my category. Let's go up to the top of the screen and look at the category that I'm selling this in. I'm selling it in musical instruments and gear, sheet music and songbooks, vintage and antique. So vintage and antique, sheet music and songbooks and musical scores and all of that. eBay has said that this category is best sold in if you use 13.5% promoted list. If you pay eBay 13.5% of every dollar you sell out of this category, eBay says that'll really be great, except it'll really be great for eBay. There's some truth in that this category is competitive, and eBay wants you higher in the search engine. If you're going to use promoted listings, eBay's theory, besides they want our money, is you might as well do what works. And this category is competitive, so you need to give us 13.5% in order to be above most people who are using a lower promoted listings percent. The problem is, again, it's a category, not my Richard Strauss Opus 11 conductor score. This is a one-of-a-kind item right now. There's not another one for sale on eBay anywhere. If someone searches for this, guess who's going to be in the #1 slot every time? Me, moi, io, yo. Little multilingual there to show you that I'm such a world traveler. I'm the only one selling this right now. There's no way I'm going to pay eBay 13.5%. I will give them my usual 3.1 because not everyone searches exactly like my title setup. My item will be found in other things. Anybody that searches for Strauss Concerto is going to see my item among others because there are a lot of Strauss concertos. There are other composers named Strauss. There's German, you know those German. But Richard Strauss is the most popular. He wrote the theme to 2001: A Space Odyssey, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, I think is the original name for that, something like that. Anyone who searches for Richard Strauss, they're going to get a lot of pieces of music. Richard Strauss score, Richard Strauss music. They're going to, it searches in this category for Richard Strauss score. They're going to get a lot of music, but mine will always be there, especially if I give eBay 13.5%, but I'm not going to. I'm going to give them 3.1. Anytime someone looks for what I'm selling, I'm the only seller. I really don't even have to do a promoted listings because I'm the only one selling it. If I don't do any promoted listings on this conductor score right now, if I don't do any promoted listings, I will always be #1 in the search engine when people look for Richard Strauss Opus 11. I need you to understand this concept. The promoted listings suggested percentage rate is for the category, not the item you're selling. The more rare your item is, really the less you need of promoted listings. However, I want to be found in every Strauss music search. So I need to do a promoted listings. I will always be found Richard Strauss Concerto Opus 11. I'll always be found in this. And by the way, well, why didn't I spell out Opus 11? Well, this is the way it's technically written, OP.11. I don't generally like punctuation in titles unless it's part of the item you're literally trying to sell and it's just part of the title has punctuation. You should use that. But in talking to you now, I've got 5 characters left I haven't used. Probably would be good to use those 5 to put a space and spell out Opus. That'll guarantee that I get found if people type Strauss Opus 11 or OP.11. So good, I'm glad we talked about it. Going back down, I'm going to try to offer this for $61.77. So I really don't want to pay eBay 13.5% of that. That's a lot of money. For me being the only one selling this score right now, I don't need a promoted listings. Let's go back down to that. But I always want one because I want to be found in other searches. Strauss music, I want to be there. If most people who sell anything related to Strauss and music, if most of them don't do promoted listings, and most don't, I'm going to appear in that search engine pretty high. I want to be seen in a lot of searches because I do some promoted listings. Most of people don't do any. And I do more than the noise at the bottom, 2.0. I do 3.1 on everything. That's why I do what I do. This is something you should consider. Don't necessarily do what I do on this one thing. You need to, though, think through what I just told you how to think through. I just gave you gold, Jerry, gold. This is how you look at promoted listings. eBay looks at it like the category. Don't you do that. You look at it like your item. How do I want this item found and seen and how often and all of that? Well, you always want it seen, but you're not going to pay 99% promoted listing to always be seen, to always be #1 in the search engine. You know, you have to weigh, I want to pay as little as possible to get it as high as possible. Well, if you're the only item or one of the few items of the thing that you're trying to sell right now, it's just one of the few for sale right now, you need a much less promoted listings to be as high in the search engine as possible because there's just not much competition. And most people who do compete against you or who try to compete against people on this channel, most of them don't. They're lousy titles, lousy pictures. They're not competing with you. They might even have a higher promoted listings and you appear higher with a lower promoted listings fee because you do so many other things so well. The promoted listings percent isn't the only thing eBay looks at whenever it's deciding how high do we want to put Mary in the search engine. eBay looks at everything, including promoted listings. And if you bribe them with a lot of money, eBay's going to put you higher because eBay wants that money if it sells. But now you know how to compare. eBay's looking at category. I'm looking at item. How do I want to be found? How high do I want to be versus how little do I want to pay eBay if it sells due to a click through promoted listings?